G'day YouTube people. Today we're going to Fremantle to the E-Shed Markets or Victoria Quay, and we're going to have a look at a problem in the Wilson car park. Here's the problem. This is a really egregious example of it, but as you can see, a vehicle with a long overhang is really intruding into the shed path. Now there is an easy solution. In this section of the car park, they've put in parking stops or car stops, whatever you want to call them, and that prevents drivers from driving right up to the curb and having the front or the rear of their vehicle intruding onto the shed path. And why am I raising this? Well, because obviously it's a safety issue for anyone using the shed path, particularly for people heading north, which means they're on the car side of the path. And as you can see along here, there's lots of bits of vehicles hanging out over the shed path, including roo bars and bull bars and tow bars and ute canopies and all sorts of things. This is just not good from a safety perspective. You could easily have people coming in opposite directions collide because the path is narrowed by all those parked vehicles, or a cyclist is going to come past and clip a pedal, clip their foot, clip their handlebars on a bit of protruding vehicle, and they're going to crash and injure themselves. And who's going to be liable under those circumstances? Is it going to be the person that parked their vehicle with bits of it overhanging, or is it going to be the car park operator who essentially created these unsafe conditions on the path, essentially on property they don't own? I guess that's a question for the Wilson lawyers, where they would stick the liability. But look, I wanted to show this on a couple of different days, because if you came down here on a weekday when there's not a lot of traffic with people going to Roto, you'd probably say, oh, there's no problem. There's hardly any vehicles parked here and overhanging the path. Well, yeah, that's true. There are some days when it's not too bad, and there are other days when it's flippin' terrible. Now, obviously, issues with that camper van there. Firstly, apart from it blocking almost half the path, it's a massive impediment to the sight lines. Now, I just wanted to show those pram and wheelchair users there as well, because obviously you're going to have people with prams and wheelchairs and goodness knows what else also using this path, and you don't want them colliding with bits of overhanging car either. It's not just pedestrians, it's not just cyclists. And I just wanted to point out here, depending on where the sun is, if tow balls are in the shadow, you can't actually see them. So again, there's a risk of someone riding along thinking they're going to miss the back of a vehicle, and they actually collide with a tow ball that they didn't see because it was a black tow ball hiding in a shadow. And you can see here, just how much of the path that ute is taking up by being able to, run their back wheels all the way up to the curb. So again, like I said, the solution is pretty easy. Put in some parking stops and stop drivers being able to intrude onto the path, because it's certainly much more of an issue these days with utes, where they've got quite a bit of clearance and they're not going to scrape bits of their car, like their bumpers, etc., on the curb. So on this particular day, August the 13th, you can see I'm almost having to ride on the centre line to avoid hitting any of these vehicles parked along here. And I guess also drivers might not be too happy if a cyclist crashes into their car and damages it because they're overhanging the path. What are they going to do then? I guess Wilson Parking would say it's not their problem, but because they're not liable for any damage in the car park. But be an interesting one. Okay, so look, there's a bike rack. Thankfully, that driver had parked out far enough that their bike rack wasn't hanging out over the path, but that bike rack, the prongs sticking out, are pretty much at neck height. So imagine going along there, not noticing that, perhaps because it's dark. I've never been through here at night, so I don't know how well lit it is, but imagine getting coat hangered by a bike rack in the dark when you're tonking along at 25 kilometers an hour. I think that'd be a trip to hospital in an ambulance. So, like I said, I think it's a pretty easy solution. Go and buy a bunch of these parking stops, install them all the way along the eastern side of the car park, and just make sure drivers are not allowing their vehicles to overhang into the shared path. Now, there's one other risk that I forgot to mention. Now, have a look at this ute here. Just imagine that was an empty parking spot, and I'm riding along here, and the driver of that ute decides to reverse into that parking spot reasonably quickly. Now, what's going to happen in those circumstances? Either I'm going to crash into the side of the ute because I don't see it coming into the spot and intruding into the bike lane, or I'm going to be going past that spot and they're going to reverse into me and knock me over sideways. And so either way, a pretty unpleasant situation and a pretty dire outcome. So yeah, that's another reason why I need to put in bump stops to stop people driving in or reversing into these bays and knocking people over.